Finesse, baby.
Peace, family. Welcome to another episode of Broken Theory. Today we got the homie DALLIS JELANI. What's good?
Hey, what's going on? Blessed to be here, man.
Man, I appreciate you, man. It's been a long time coming, man. When we finally here.
Yeah. Schedules never sync up perfectly, but when they do, it's like magic, right?
For sure. Definitely, man. I just wanted to have you on the show, man, to get into how you first got started with music and what that journey was like for you.
Yeah, so it's been kind of a long, scenic route to get to music. I started out as a physician. I was doing medicine and I'm still doing medicine, have been for the last 15 years. But way back in the day, I've always kind of had a deep love for music, and I actually thought I was going to go into music first. But to be honest, I sort of stopped believing in myself a little bit and decided that it was better, or I guess my skill set was better served in medicine. But I sort of always made a promise to myself that I'd come back to music. And so, 15 years later, deep into the medicine game, I kind of realized it was now or never. So I kind of pumped the brakes on that and moved back towards my first love. And now I've been doing this actively now for about 4 years.
For sure. I want to dive deep into that, man, because I feel like that's something that a lot of people could resonate with and also get some value and wisdom from, you overcoming your situation. Especially studying medicine, man, that's a practice that, one, there's a lot of money involved, and two, it takes a lot of time to even be able to do that. You know what I mean? Talk about some of the feelings that you went through and maybe some of the things that helped you overcome that whole process and, come back into believing yourself and following your dreams, into following music.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of feelings that went into it, right? I mean, self-doubt was probably the primary one. I kind of always felt like my calling was in music, but, to put it in perspective, the first time I ever performed in front of people was in college. And it was a song that I wrote that I sampled a Blackstreet song, and I flipped it into another R&B song that I wrote and performed in front of people. So I had the whole backing track done and everything. Wow. And it was at a little open mic, and when I performed the song, obviously it was my first time performing, so it wasn't a great performance, and I got a bunch of positive responses from people, but all I could hear was the negativity, like even the constructive criticism sounded like negativity to me. And so I wasn't necessarily emotionally ready to pursue that path and like be vulnerable in that kind of way. And so what seemed easier to me was to go towards my second love, which was medicine. And like just kind of, it honestly felt like if I just put my head down and studied, I could get it done. And so I went into medicine, and then, like I said, I sort of got to a point where I realized that if I really wanted to be authentic and true to myself and really sort of, be the person that I envisioned I was going to be to begin with, it needed to be a 180-degree switch and to go back to the thing that I wanted to do, which was originally music. And so, like I said, like the biggest feeling there was self-doubt, and overcoming self-doubt is a human journey. It's a lifelong human journey, right? And
sure.
I still deal with that kind of stuff today, but at the very least, I'm not willing to lie to myself anymore about, what the correct path is. If that makes sense.
I feel like self-doubt a lot of the times is a lot of the stuff that we know we need to do.
Finesse, baby.
And we just don't want to do it, you know what I mean? But it can creep in on us, you know what I mean, in vulnerable moments. And, I could tell you something and be like, this is how you get over this, blah, blah, blah. And like, you could be like, man, you don't know what you're talking about, da, 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 you know what I mean? And it's like, if you would just try it, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
different
well,
things.
It's the same conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
100%. It's the same conversation I have with my kids all the time. It's you see them kind of make the same mistakes that you made growing up, and you want to prevent that kind of thing from happening, but you can't really, right? It's like people sort of have to learn at their own pace, and they have to make the mistakes they need to make so that they can grow. And everyone's path is different, which is why I kind of always say, I never try to give people advice, but I always tell them my perspective and my story, and if they can learn something from that, then more power to them. And if not, then they can just push it to the side and keep stepping, and that's all good too.
You could bring a horse to the water, you can't make him drink. And that, as cliche as it sounds, man, that's one of the difficult things about life, man. Like you could try to make them drink, but if they don't want to, they're not going to, and they never will.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
talk about any experiences that you've had in the music industry that kind of maybe rubbed you in the wrong way or kind of added to that decision of you chasing medicine.
I don't know that any of them made me chase medicine. Like the biggest thing that sort of made me go for medicine first was the idea of self-doubt, not really believing in myself, and also just really in some ways prioritizing financial security and like just general like social security over being vulnerable in the way that you have to be an artist.
For sure.
There's difficulties that come with being in medicine. Obviously, it's long hours. It's, watching people through their hardest days, that kind of thing, and being an anesthesiologist, it's like literally bringing people to the brink of death and then bringing them back, during surgery and stuff like that. So there's difficulties, and I'm not saying that I'm not trying to downplay those at all, but the types of personal difficulties you have to be an artist are far greater, and it takes a certain personality to be able to do that, frankly. But to your original question, the things that have sort of the experiences that I had in the music industry now that have sort of like pushed me further in my own artistry have been sort of starting my own music business. That I was working with a guy in town in Houston here, and we just sort of got to a point where we had these pretty strong creative differences. I was sort of focusing more on like specific intentionality within every song, my songs taking journeys, making sure every sample had a place within the song and making sure every lyric like fit that sample, and even the imagery that I'm using, like having specific meaning and not necessarily just being perfect, but pulling the meaning in different directions kind of thing. And not to say that he wasn't doing those same things, but the way that he saw those things was different than the way that I saw them. And the more we kind of tried to fit our brands or our ideas of how our brand should work together, the less that it seemed to fit. And I came to a point where I literally had to, we sat down and talked in the studio one day, and I literally had to tell him, like, man, I literally don't think I can be the partner that you need so that you can grow. And at the same time, in the back of my mind, it was also like, I'm not sure that you're the partner that I need so that I can grow either. And so it just was at a point where it didn't really seem like it made sense to try to force the fit anymore.
For sure.
But to his credit, he introduced me to a lot of people in Houston in the, sort of the relatively underground Houston hip hop scene that I would have never met otherwise, because I'm generally a shy person, and so I wouldn't have gone out of my way to meet these people. Sure. So there's definitely a lot of hard lessons that were learned and a lot of positives that came out of it. But,
Absolutely.
it's you got to know when the time's up for things and when it's time to sort of keep moving forward,
Yep. You gotta know when to say goodbye, honestly.
Frankly.
But at the end of the day, everything happens for a reason. You know what I mean? And the experience alone, man, like you said, you took a lot from it. What was one of those moments that you kind of realized that, like, hey, this isn't working out for me?
I'd say probably there's a handful of like little things that happen. You have sort of discernment about things where you think, oh, that didn't quite line up with what I expected. But especially when you're trying to build a business and like you're with people that you respect and trust, you're sort of willing to give them the benefit of the doubt for a long time, or at least see the best in people. Which I'm not saying is a bad thing, but sometimes it goes a little bit too far. But I would say the thing that probably pushed me the most, or where I like really realized it, was when we got to about our third year in operation, and it sort of felt like we were recycling the same plans that we had been doing for the first 2 years, and we didn't really have any direction towards how we could, change those plans or grow and elevate those plans, or even, scrap those plans and try entirely different things. Yeah. And I don't fault him for that either, because, I was half the company. So like, I didn't have the plans either, Sure. But it was just one of those situations where, we would meet up in the studio, we'd make music, everything was perfect. We'd vibe pretty hard. We'd make some great songs. And then when it came to sort of, how to get those songs out, when to get those songs out, what sort of, in-person access points we were going to have, shows, that kind of stuff. We sort of disagreed on just about how all that stuff would look. And so it just didn't quite make sense to try to, square peg round hole anymore.
No, I feel
so
it,
to
man.
speak.
I feel it.
Yeah.
But that discernment alone, man, it takes a lot. You know what I mean? Just to be able to like walk away from something that, you know, clearly it wasn't working for you, but I mean, at some point it did serve a purpose. You know what I mean? So like to be able to say, hey, hold on, man, I need to go somewhere completely different. You know what I mean? And I'm willing to sacrifice whatever it is. If you understand, you understand. If you don't, you don't, you know, and I hope for the better for you. You know what I mean? That's amazing.
Yeah. And, you know, to his credit, man, you know, without him, I wouldn't have had, you know, artists to practice my production skills with. I wouldn't have had, you know, artists to practice my mixing and mastering skills with. Sure. And so I honestly credit him for a lot of the skills that I developed relatively quickly over the course of like 3 years, you know, like without that relationship, I wouldn't be able to be the artist that I am today in some ways, you know?
For sure.
But like I said, you know, you gotta also be willing to like you said, really too, you got to be willing to sacrifice whatever if you feel like it's not serving the end goal, especially when you get really, really clear on what that vision's supposed to be.
Absolutely. You know? Now, did it end off as far as like you guys are still on talking terms, or just like, you know, not at all?
Yeah, we still talk. I mean, it's definitely not as frequent as it was before. It was like every 2 days we were in each other's, in each other's text messages and things like that. Now it's probably like once a week, and I still try to help him out with some mixing stuff here and there, and I still try to help him with some creative direction stuff because there's certain gaps that he has that I can certainly help fill for him, and there's certain gaps that I have that he can still help fill for me. For sure. So it's as amicable as I think a business relationship ending could be. You know what I mean?
No, I definitely feel it. As an artist that's, of course, found his sound, how do you decide when a piece of music is ready to be shared with the world?
Man, I don't even know if I've honestly found my sound yet. I'm still always exploring. But the decision for me, at least, when I'm trying to put stuff out or when I know it's ready is pretty difficult because I have a tendency to sort of dive really, really far into the details and get lost in the details, and start to think, okay, well, I could fix this thing. Oh, okay. Well, like anything, right? So when it comes to like producing a track from the ground up, instrumental or vocal track, you know, I could say, oh, well, this snare isn't exactly right. It's not hitting hard. It doesn't have the right space with it. So I could spend, you know, a full 2 days worth of sessions just trying to find a snare sound, you know, or like,
those are the best
you know,
sessions,
when it's they are though, and the sound selection, they're the most important ones when it comes down to it. But you know, even like vocal stacks, vocal arrangement, you know, I'm always trying different things, you know, to try to, you know, isolate different feelings. And so I can get really lost into those details. And so for me, what I have to do with my own practice with music is to set pretty strict time limits with myself, which is to say, I have to have something coming out every 2 weeks. Otherwise, I will get stuck on any one song for potentially like 3, 4, 5 months, you know? Yeah. But it's good because it means that I have to have a lot of music working at once. It also means that I'm forcing myself to essentially say, you get maybe about a month, maybe 2 months maximum on a song to really dive into the details. And at that point, you really haven't gotten it past 90%. Like it's probably done and you're probably just doing too much. Yeah. And so that's kind of how I keep myself on pace these days. You know, it's just
I feel it.
Being really strict with the output.
No, that's dope though, because I mean, especially with that method, what a lot of independent artists and producers can take from that, man, is just like, you know, having a vault is important because like if you have a vault, you're not really going to be pressed on dropping things every 2 weeks because like you already have a line of like different other projects that you can drop at any given time. But you know, of course, songs are like your babies, so like you know, at the end of the day, you know, you got this new one and you're like, hey, I want to drop this right now, you know what I mean? And it's like, nah, it still needs work, let me drop something, you know what I mean, from last year or whatever, you know, just to have that ability, man. You know, most people aren't working like how they think they're working, you know what I mean? So just to see you putting it in action, it's very dope, man. It's very dope. How important is faith to you, bro?
exceedingly important, although I don't necessarily think I think about it in the same way that most people think about it. Like, I don't necessarily think everything's written for us, you know. I do think that we have a very specific beginning, otherwise we wouldn't have been here. I do think that we have a very specific end, otherwise, you know, this trip doesn't make any sense. But I honestly believe that everything that happens in the middle is it's really up to our decision making, right? And it's not to say that we can choose or be anything, right? Because where you start really has a lot of bearing on where you end, right?
For sure.
But in that middle range, you know, there's a lot of opportunity for you to make decisions, to even just small decisions in the beginning of your day, like deciding to wake up with gratitude versus waking up with a bad attitude, right? Those types of little decisions that we get every day completely can shift the trajectory of that one day. And, you know, those things stack up to shift an entire trajectory of a month, and so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden, the places that you end up are much further away than you could ever imagine to begin with, right?
Sure.
So it's like, there's a lot of things we can be, and I think it's pretty infinite when we're very young, and the older we get, the range gets a lot smaller.
Oh yeah.
But it's not to say that it's impossible to do just about anything. It just becomes very, very, very difficult. You know,
it can be done, but it's just about how bad you really want it. You know what I mean?
What are you willing to sacrifice?
Exactly. Who taught you about gratitude? You mentioned waking up with gratitude instead of an attitude, right? So where did you get that from?
Man, a lot of places. I know my parents definitely tried to teach me that stuff when I was a kid, and I don't think I learned it until like last week from them. And there's been a lot of people along the way. I mean, you know, mentors in college. One name comes to mind very easily, Hugh Suffren. He's one of the guys who led the Office of Black Student Affairs back in my college, and I was like one of the guys there a lot, and also a president of the Black Student Association for a while. And then in medical school, you know, my advisors there, even all the way throughout, you know, medical residency, I had a couple of, you know, physician mentors who would teach me about that kind of stuff. I guess probably the person I credit most with it is one of my dad's best friends from medical school, who's kind of like an uncle to me. He's a half Japanese cat. And he gave me this book called The Art of Peace when I was probably about 17 or 18, or I might have been just been going into medical school. I can't remember which. But it's essentially about how you can, you know, change your life, or really how you can move throughout life as a warrior. And by being a warrior, it doesn't mean by fighting everything. It literally means that you should be, you know, become fully aware of your surroundings and find a way to harmonize with your surroundings, right? And one of the easiest ways to do that, frankly, is to find a way to be thankful for anything and everything, and especially the negative things that happen in your life. And that's the challenge. It's like, you know, waking up and your back hurts and saying, oh, thank you for this back pain. Not like, thank you that I have, you know, Tylenol in my cupboard, but no, it's literally thank you for this back pain. Or, you know, you crash your car and it's like, okay, well, thank you. Like, I crashed my car. I'm okay in my car. I crashed it, but maybe if I hadn't crashed it here, I was going to hit somebody with my car, you know, but and you know, it's not about hallucinating details. It's about literally just being thankful for what's in front of you. And, it's difficult. It's easy to be thankful when things are good, but it's not so easy when things are negative, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. What are some of the ways that when things are difficult for you, that you kind of tap into that gratitude still?
Well, the first thing I do is every single morning when I wake up, I usually hit snooze, you know, so those 9 minutes, I used to fall right back asleep, but in the past 40 days or so, I've been getting sober, like entirely sober, and trying to even cut out sugar and coffee.
Wow. Congrats, man.
I appreciate that. For
sure.
But every morning when I hit snooze, instead of going right back to sleep, I literally just say thank you. And I'm not even necessarily sure that I'm speaking to anybody in particular. I'm just trying to, you know, get the reps in of making it easy for me to do that. And I'm obviously like, you know, I'm up at 4:30 in the morning when I'm doing my anesthesia days. So I'm dead tired. But, you know, I hit that snooze once, I start saying thank you. And there's something in my heart or in my mind that I feel that I'm thankful for, I'll say thank you for that specific thing. And if I really don't feel like I have anything to be thankful for, if I'm just in a terrible attitude or terrible mood that day, I just say thank you for the bad attitude, or thank you for the moods, thank you for my emotions in general,
Because they
I
push
just
you
try
in
to
a
say
certain
thank you.
direction anyway. They push you somewhere. Every time you do have a bad attitude or something, it leads to something positive. Sometimes, most of the time.
Yeah.
What sacrifices? Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, if you, I feel like if you believe in higher powers, you believe in ultimate good, you also have to believe that negative or evil can push on you as well. And like, if ultimate good exists, or like a God does exist, and it is all powerful and almighty, like it's made space for even that evil, right? And so like you have to find a way to be thankful for the negativity, if you can, or when you can, because it's part of the plan, or whatever fate exists, so to speak, right?
For sure. What sacrifices do you feel like you've made to get where you are right now?
I don't know that I've made a lot, frankly. I definitely worked hard. I definitely have been trying to be everything that I can be for myself and for my family and for my kids. But sacrifices, nothing really. I don't necessarily try to leave things behind. That's probably one of my biggest negatives, is I tend to see the best in people all the time. I tend to try to keep everything around me and bring everything with me. And maybe that's a positive, maybe it's a negative, but I don't necessarily try to sacrifice. I try to find a way that everything can work towards my benefit of my highest good, if that makes sense.
No, I got you.
Because I don't necessarily think that sacrifice is always the right choice, right? Like we were talking about before, like you have to kind of know when it's time to let things go. Yeah. And that's sort of a lesson that I'm learning slowly. But I don't know necessarily that sacrificing things is always the right thing.
Yeah. No, I got you.
So I'm not sure that I've done it a lot. It's probably something I need to do more of, to be perfectly honest.
Nah, I feel it. Any books that you're reading or that you have read that changed your life forever?
Man, after medical school, I don't read as much as I used to, because that was just kind of like, reading
torture, huh?
reading textbooks for hours and hours, months and months.
Yeah.
And if I'm really, really honest, I've never been much of like a person who reads for enjoyment. Like I never really read like fiction stuff, right? When I did pick up stuff to read, and even today when I do pick up things to read, it's always like philosophy texts, like essays, stuff like that. The one thing that I've been reading a lot recently is some essays on Aristotle's doctrine of becoming.
Okay.
Which is pretty interesting stuff. It's pretty like heavy, pretty heady stuff. But it's pretty interesting the way that they talk about like being in general and what that means. Like, and not just like human beings, but what the idea of like anything having like the substance of existence means. And I just try to like see what people are saying about even the most basic, not basic, but like the most fundamental things in existence. And if I feel like if I can figure out how, or even get any idea about how those things work, then maybe I can apply those things to my life, and then it can help, project me or propel me,
absolutely,
further or forward in the things that I like to do,
Absolutely. What would you say is the biggest takeaway so far from the one that you're reading currently?
Biggest takeaway is probably that, the substance of things is really, it's really multifaceted, right? There's like the realm of existence that we're in right now, where everything is, ordered and comes, cause and effect, but that's just an illusion.
How do you handle creative block?
Yeah, so with creative block, man, there's a couple things I try to do. The biggest one is just trying to get a different perspective, right? So oftentimes it's, getting out of where I'm at physically, just going outside, having a new conversation with someone I haven't talked to, or even a conversation with someone I haven't talked to in a long time. But just generally trying to like shock my system into getting a new perspective. But one of the things that actually always helps me with creative block is recognizing or believing in the fact that I'm not necessarily the one who's doing the creating all the time. I think it was, I'm pretty sure it was Nipsey Hussle. He said in an interview once that he sort of believes that, we're sort of antenna and we draw things down. As long as you sort of tune yourself correctly, you can sort of pull down whatever you want, and the skill sets you develop just tighten your tuning and make it so that you can produce that tune with higher fidelity, so to speak. And so for me, it's a mixture of getting a new scene, or really just every day that I need to do something creative is just showing up, and whatever comes out essentially comes out. And if I really don't feel creative, then it's a matter of doing the things that you probably don't like to do but are important for being a creative who's trying to get your art in front of people. For sure. Like editing videos like I've been doing today, that kind of stuff,
The fun stuff, man.
Yeah, the details.
And I think you said Mondays are your anesthesiology days as well, right?
Yeah, Monday, Wednesday, Friday usually.
So coming out of that and then going into video editing is pretty subpar, huh?
Man, it's like, especially in anesthesia, because all I'm doing there is like, the joke is that all we do is play on our phones, like play Sudoku, right? But to be honest, like it's a job that we're not doing a lot, but we're always paying attention to everything around us, right? We're scanning the monitor, scanning the patient every 5 seconds.
You have to.
And so it's that mental energy. I'm like fully sapped of mental energy from that, and then I got to go in and start focusing on like exactly what frame I want like my lyric to sit on a specific video. And it's like, it's mind-numbingly boring, to be perfectly honest. But that's where the creativity lies, right? And that's where the the intention behind the art lies. And that's you got to dive into the dirt, frankly, to make good stuff.
For sure, man. Yeah, it seems like you're wired to be very detail oriented. You know what I mean? And you can tell that through your music and your art, man. I was looking at one of the videos you did where it was like half of your face was still and the other half was moving. And it was like, that was pretty dope, man. And original. I mean, I haven't seen anybody do anything of that nature like that, man. Where do you get inspiration for your creativity as far as like the art and where you see yourself as an artist?
Lots of different places, man. I mean, the music that I grew up with is probably the primary thing, but not just music in general. I mean, it's like the arts in general. I was really big into film and screenwriting as a kid and throughout college. So there's like, guys like Jim Jarmusch, and the one that specifically you mentioned, that's from a song called Color Me Ungrateful. That actually came from a couple of different places, but the musical inspiration for that, at least for the visual inspiration, was Mos Def's Black on Both Sides, that album, right? So that's why you have that sort of like heavily saturated, almost like yellowy green feel to the part that's in color. And then if you look at some of the other posts that I put up for that same song, the other inspiration is from a movie called Memento, which was a Christopher Nolan movie from way back in the day. And so that one is that's sort of a mixture of those two different things, right? And that's kind of what I try to do with all of my music. Is I try to draw from artists and other things that really influenced me growing up, and I try to see how I can put those into my lyrics, either directly or if it comes to just the visuals, and how I can sort of like tie that whole world together and present it to someone so they can get like a full emotional picture of where I'm coming from, essentially.
Absolutely. No, you did a great job, man. I just wanted to give you your kudos on that one, man. What would you say are 3 of your top albums that kind of shaped your sound or you as an artist?
That's always a tough question, man, because I go back and forth every time someone asks me that question. I grew up listening to so many different kinds of music. Like,
for sure.
I mean, I remember there's one song I'm working on right now where I talk about how my mom threw away my Jimmy Eat World CD. So I listened to like emo punk back in the day, also Foo Fighters, that kind of stuff. But the first album that I have to say that really like changed me was Tupac's All Eyes on Me. It was I had never actually heard any hip hop before that album, and so like to hear that as a teenager, it literally blew my mind, because I was like, yo, this is possible. Like, people can say this and like they get paid to do it, and like people accept it and it resonates, and it just completely blew my mind. So that's got to be one. In terms of like more contemporary artists, you know, people that I kind of look up to or try to emulate for sound, GoldLink is definitely one of them. Because he's got sort of this way that he sort of, I don't know, he just sort of like bounces and like grooves and floats over tracks. That's just so, it's so effortless the way he does things.
Multi-dimensional.
Yeah, him and Kate Trinata, they sort of like work together a lot. And so like those guys together like is probably some of my favorite stuff in the past, like, you know, 10 years.
Definitely.
And then a third person who continually, you know, amazes me, Flying Lotus. You know, he's sort of, I think if I remember correctly, he's like John Coltrane, the jazz musician's nephew or something like that.
What? That's the first time I've heard that. That's crazy.
I'm pretty sure he's related. Maybe not nephew, but I mean, it stands to reason that like he's got, you know, greatness and music in his bloodstream because you know he goes from essentially producing, you know, what you could call relatively standard, straightforward hip hop for, you know, the early 2000s to all of a sudden making like, you know, completely Asian themed and like really like representative, like wholly representative of that culture, soundtracks for different movies, but also still very much into the tradition of, you know, African and Black, you know, jazz music, you know, and it's like, it's incredible for me to see how someone can like really be in so many different lanes and still seem like 100% themselves, you know? So I'm always inspired by that. And that's kind of like, amazing. It really inspires my exploration, to be honest.
What are some of the ways that you kind of ground yourself, like in your creativity, like where maybe you notice I'm going a little too far, or like how do you always find where to come back at?
I mean, there's a couple ways. I got a couple of people that I talk to whose ear I trust, you know, and that's like gold for me. One of them was my buddy from back home. His name's Jess. We grew up together. Like we went to school since you know, maybe about 10 years old together. And he's like a brother to me. It's like I'm actually a little jealous of him, if I'm honest, because like I've had to like train really hard to get like a good ear so I can hear things in songs, and he's just like naturally has that. But like it's invaluable. Yeah. It's like I was like, man, why couldn't I have that? You know, but it's like invaluable to me because he can hear not only what I've done with scratch track, but also exactly where I'm trying to go with it. And like, he also knows me better than I know myself in some ways. And so he can sort of like help say, hey, I know what you're trying to do. I understand that. But like, where's the you in that, you know? And so he kind of helps keep me like centered a little bit. And then if I'm also really honest, I try not to center as much as I can because I feel that the further I push myself and the further I get outside of my comfort zone and the more that I experiment, that's sort of where the gold and where the magic is, right? So I kind of rely on people like Jess to bring me back to center when I'm completely off the reservation, but I happily walk off the reservation. Like I go off as much as I can, you know?
Yeah, that's a great skill, man. A lot of people have a hard time, you know what I mean, being able to do that. I feel like the key in being a great artist in general is just being gentle with yourself, allowing yourself to have a human experience, man. Just like in general, not tying yourself down to like, okay, I'm a rapper, like everything I rap has to have bars, like, you know what I mean? Like sometimes it's about the emotion that you give somebody by listening to the song. Sometimes it's about the feeling you give them, you know what I mean? Like when they hear it for the first time in the club or, you know, whatever your avenue that you're trying to reach, you know what I mean? So it's definitely a dope thing, man, especially when you can have your hands in multiple avenues.
Yeah, and that's not to say that like the club music isn't, you know, beneficial or necessary, right? Like, you know, you got to have that music that lets you forget your cares and get out there and just shake something. You know, that's so important, you know? But I don't know that I necessarily fit in that lane, but I wouldn't stop myself from going in that lane if the feeling was right and like I had the bars for it or I had the sound for it. I would totally walk right in there and just do my thing, and that might be the only song that I do that on, but like I'm gonna do it to the best of my ability when I get there. But in the meantime, I try not to pigeonhole myself into one idea of what my artistry is, because and maybe it's a blessing, frankly, no one's listening right now anyway, so I get the latitude of being as creative as I want, whereas someone who's, you know, on the top of the hill, they don't get that latitude. You know, it's rare, I think, that you get to see people who can go in between multiple genres and be accepted, you know, like your Childish Gambinos, for example, you know. But
he's
like,
one of the one that built the bridge, man. Like, you know, him and Drake,
exactly.
really. You know?
Yeah, exactly right. You know, and without guys like that, I don't think it would be as socially acceptable. And even those guys still get a lot of backlash for it too. You know, even Lil Wayne did like an alternative rock album, and like nobody listened to it. But like that was like my favorite one of his.
I listened
in some
to
ways,
it. Yeah,
you know?
definitely.
Yeah, it was weird. Don't get me wrong. Like you're like, Wayne, what is this, man? But like, yeah,
man,
there's a lot of dope tracks out there, you know.
Yep,
but he was pushing his artistry, and I respect when people do that, especially when they're up at the top like that, because it shows that they have real intention behind all of their songs, even when like their sound is very manicured and it falls really neatly within a category. It's like, well, they chose that, and they're being very, very particular about the fact that they chose that, you know. And like, I think people forget that, you know.
Absolutely. We got less than 30 seconds left, man. What's coming next for you, bro?
Man, I've got 3 songs coming out in the next 6 weeks. Some of them are pretty chill. Some of them are a little bit more like hardcore rap. And I'm just honestly hopeful that people will, you know, pop onto, you know, social media, pop onto Spotify and just give me a couple spins, man, and hopefully catch a vibe.